Hey, what's happening, everybody? Good morning. It's Robert-Hoenix talking over his music. It's okay, we can do that here. Welcome to another edition of 15 Minutes of Flame. And I have been out of the loop for the past, 4 days or so. Some stretches. It's been a very intense 4 days. Took off on Friday and did not do the show, obviously, on Friday. And I was in absentia on Sunday night as well as on Monday morning. So today we're back again. Hey, how about that? I was at the new Paracon conference down in Houston. And I want to thank Roz Barone for making it such a great event. And I hope she does it again next year. And I hope that she can put together as good a group as she did this time around. It was a little challenging, I think, because, excuse me, there is still sort of the semblance of a hurricane that had hit Houston. And while I did not get close to the areas that were damaged, because where we were in the hotel, the lovely West Chase Hilton, that area had been pretty much untouched by what Harvey hath wrought. It's on the west side of Houston, and a lot of the damage to Houston's on the southeastern side. However, at the hotel there were, and I believe this is probably the case for a lot of hotels in the Houston area. I'm making an assumption here that our hotel was not only occupied by the conference people, but it's also was quite full with people who I believe had been displaced. Also, it was full with workers who were going out on a daily basis and removing debris from homes and businesses and streets. And these people would come on to, we'd see them at the end of the day, especially like on Friday when we pulled in. These people would walk into the elevators and you could just tell that they had been through hell, because they've got to revisit hell every day as they pull the flotsam and jetsam of human experience out of those zones, and they're just absolutely exhausted. You can just see the looks on their faces, just exhausted. And a lot of these folks are from Louisiana, where they have some experience pulling debris away from structures, homes, etc., etc., etc. So it's quite ironic that here we are, we're having this conference about, the afterlife, other life, the end of this life, because all three of those were covered, the afterlife being the paranormal group, other life being the alien group, and then the end of life, it really isn't coming. I guess maybe I was the end of life guy, I don't know. But I had 2 talks there, and it was great. It was totally great. I had a great time. But here these people are, they're out there in the midst of life. It's such an ironic and paradoxical kind of experience, because Houston is just filled with restaurants. Look, if you like to eat, that's your city. I'm telling you right now, man. That is your city, because there are restaurants galore in Houston. Everything. And some of my favorite food. I saw more Brazilian, Argentinian, churrasqueira meat places, and more Asian places, and a variety of Asian places than almost any other place I've ever been. So I can be happy eating that food. Anyway, it was a really good conference, and I gave 2 talks on, one was on Uranus and Taurus, the other was on Aries and Chiron. And though the attendance in both rooms was not quite as robust as one might have liked it to have been, it's okay. I still enjoyed talking and communicating and relating to people, and it was really rewarding. And I was fairly busy, I guess, on the reading front. I think I did okay on that front. So it was a good time. Had by all, Randy Moggins was there. Big shout out to Randy. We got to hang out. Great guy, wonderful wife. We didn't get to hang out. We had breakfast and drinks together, and could have done more, but he was really involved. He was emceeing panels and stuff like that. And then I also spent some time with Travis Walton, who is the man who was made famous by a close encounter incident in Arizona. I believe it was back in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. And there was a movie that came out about his experience, and the movie is called Fire in the Sky. And Travis was there, and he was a super nice guy. In fact, I came down on the hotel elevator with him at the same time. We descended. Travis Walton and I descended together. I didn't know it was Travis Walton. I found out later. William Henry was there, and I had a brief moment with William at the dinner, speaker dinner, and we were in line getting food. And it was great because we knew of each other, and we hadn't really connected. But he was there; he did his thing. And then on the final night, I got to spend some time with Duncan O'Finian. And Duncan, what an interesting man! Holy Moses! I thought my life was sort of unique, but Duncan O'Finian's got me beat 3 or 4 times over. Of course, his interesting is not really the kind of interesting that a lot of people want to experience. Let's put it that way. Duncan is what we would call a survivor of super soldierdom. He hates the word super soldier. He really, I forget the term. It's about augmented human. So Duncan was part of a program where they super soldiered him out. I mean, I'm just going to use the word because you're familiar with it. We talked a lot about that, and then so he and his wife, they do clearings, and I think they do implant removals and all kinds of fascinating things. And Duncan, we're sitting around, we're talking, and so his wife brings up the fact that just a few weeks ago he went to this center where this guy was there, and he had a gun, and he was shooting, and then Duncan got shot at. I think he got shot at 3 times just a few weeks ago. And they had his cell phone in this plastic bag. There was a bullet that had gone right through the cell phone. And they actually had the bullet in the plastic bag too. I got to see this like personal forensics. Because this guy was like a live shooter, and Duncan diffused the situation, and he took a bullet in his cell phone. And then he also had a bullet graze the left side of his eye, and they had a picture from him in the hospital. And you could see this bloody kind of streak on the left side of his eye. One of the guy's bullets just grazed him. That was just a few weeks ago. Like I said, he lives an interesting life. Perhaps a little too interesting for my taste on that end, but certainly, at the very least, a compelling bar story. Wow. Anyway, got to meet him, and like I said, it was a fantastic conference. But the weird part was coming back. When I drove back, I said, "Okay, I'm just going to get back to Austin." I do this sometimes, About 10 o'clock at night, I was fried. I had a great weekend. Don't get me wrong, but I was fried. So I get my truck, which was acting up. I had issues with my vehicle, and so I'm coming back, and I actually missed a turn to go to Austin. So I'm driving down Highway 10, And I realized that I'm on my way to San Antonio, lovely city. I don't live there. And I crossed, I felt like, you know what, I felt like it was the old days without GPS. But I wasn't using GPS at this point. I was even beyond maps. And so I crossed the San Marcos River. I'm like, I'm not supposed to cross the San Marcos River. I know that for a fact. I've gone too far. So I turned and I wound up going onto this, eventually this 183. It's a highway. And it's 2 lanes in one direction, 2 lanes in the other direction. The median is a wide swath of dirt and brown grass and small cut weeds. Pretty wide. And then of course there are openings in the median so you can turn and turn around. They have this here. So here I am and I'm cruising along and my engine's acting up and my check engine light goes from a constant light to a blinking check engine light. So I think, okay, I've got some trouble here. So I pull over, it's about 1 in the morning, about 25 miles away, 3.5 miles away from the interstate, Highway 71. So I pull over and I decide I'm going to turn my car slightly kind of going backwards, and I'm going to go into that sort of turn lane, U-turn lane. I'm going to loop back and go down the road because there's a gas station down the road. I thought maybe this is the best thing for me to do. Check my oil, don't want to blow my engine up. Whatever it is. So there was a truck with a trailer. It was pulling in that median area, trying to make its own turn. And remember, this is 1:30 in the morning. There's really not a lot of traffic out. I look. I'm going to make this move. I make the turn, and as I'm doing it, all of a sudden I hear the sound of a horn and the whoosh of something racing by me, and then which is my vehicle being clipped. And it all happened so quickly, and I realized very, very quickly, of course, that there was a crossover SUV that was traveling at a very high speed, who did not pass me on the right, could have passed me on the right, passes me on the left, and has 2 wheels on the edge of the lane that I was in, and 2 wheels in the median, and clips the left front part of my bumper. And so I'm like, wow, this is insane. So he stops about half a mile down the road. I drive down there because, you know, you've got some legal responsibilities when stuff like this happens, right? Plus I want to see what's going on in my car. So I drive down there and he gets out, I get out, and pretty clear he's from someplace else. And I'm not talking Louisiana, California, Rhode Island, someplace else. He's not a fluent English-speaking person. Okay, you get my drift, right? English wasn't bad, but clearly not language number 1. And he's a young guy, and he was really sort of mostly unshaken. And he kept walking over to his car to see what was happening. So there was a kind of a white. What happened is that his tire kind of clipped my tire, and his tire clipped the front part of my bumper. And so I've got his tire marks on the left side of my car, which can be buffed out. And he has a similar kind of white patch. There's no physical damage to the structure of his car that he could buff out. He kept walking over there and putting his hand over it and says, I think I can take care of this, I think I can take care of this. He didn't want to deal with insurance, likely because he had none. And so we're sitting there trying to just get through our own various situations. I'm looking under the hood of my car because my engine is still acting up. And then all of a sudden, this truck, a little bit bigger than mine, comes flying past us. I mean, flying. I mean, when you're on a freeway, when you're on the side of a freeway or highway, and cars are driving really fast, you get a sense as to how fast these vehicles are really moving. I mean, most of the time we're just kind of, entombed in these in these cars or trucks. And this guy goes flying past us. There's a slight curve, slight bend in the highway. And he misses that, and he goes right into the median and rolls his truck about 3 times. And then all of a sudden, the guy that I'm sort of sorting this out with, he gets in his car and he races down there to see if there's damage, what can he do, the whole 9 yards. And I'm like, I'm out of here, I'm sorry. Your car is mostly okay, my car is mostly okay. We don't have to talk anymore. We're not going to do the insurance dance, it's not happening. And there is way too much going on for my taste at 1:30 in the morning in this part of the world. I want to leave right now. You know, and I began to think about the energy of accidents in places, which is a very real thing, by the way. Like, what's occurred in that stretch? What's gone down in that one stretch of Highway 183? An open-ended question. I got back and I made it in one piece. I'd like to thank my angels for working overtime, because had said young fellow in the crossover actually rear-ended me, both of us would have been somewhere on the 183, or for just kind of dealing with what would have occurred. And he would have hit me and probably shot me about 20 to 30 feet down the road. That's my estimation. And who knows how my truck would have reacted, being rear-ended by somebody doing about 80 to 85 miles an hour, because that's how fast he was going. But the piece that really is the kind of the missing piece of what could have been just a tremendous disaster was this truck that came flying by. Had we both been on the road instead of off the road as this truck came flying by, there's no telling what would have happened. Could have been major. Anyway, I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad to be in one piece. And sometimes you have these weird premonitions, and the weird premonition was, I wonder if I'm going to wind up getting into some kind of event on the way home. And guess what I did? I most certainly did. Well, since I'm here alive and talking with you, I may as well talk about something else other than my accident experience, which is kind of like fantasy football. Nobody really wants to hear about your fantasy football team, and people will hear about your accident story for a little bit, and then they'll like, okay, whatever. Life's rough. Move on. So let's get into it. What's happening out there in the world? Well, we are approaching September 23rd, of course. That being this Saturday, when supposedly the end of the world, or Revelation, commences. And that's when we have the stars, planets in the sign of Leo. There's 8 in the crown, and you have the 5 planets in Virgo in the belt. And of the Virgin, and of course that's based on astronomy and sidereal astrology, because the Virgo planets, based on Western Placidus Mundane, are going to be in Libra, and some of the Leo planets will be in Virgo. Not all of them, because we're dealing with fixed stars, so on and so on and so on. However, the date is arriving, and I'm not sure it actually feels like Revelation and Armageddon. However, certainly some of the events leading up to it have that look and feel. We've had hurricanes, we've had fires, we've had earthquakes. Now in Houston, they have unprecedented swarms of mosquitoes. So we have pestilence. Just check that box. Check, 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 check. Pestilence has arrived, and what are they doing? Well, they're flying these bug bombers across the southern part of the state, adding to the chemtrails that they're already spraying, and they're back in force. Just like clockwork, here comes autumn rolling round, and here come the chemtrails crisscrossing the sky. They do this. They start off in autumn/fall, and they go through the winter, and up until part of the spring, and then they drop off for a while in the summertime. I've seen it every single year. Every year. Because guess what they're doing? They're going to the southern hemisphere. And they're doing what they do in the southern hemisphere during fall and winter, which is our spring and summer. So they're seasonal spraying. Just you'll notice it if you keep your eyes open. You'll notice it, you'll understand it, you'll get it. So they're back and turning our morning skies into gray clouds of goo. Gray clouds of goo and muck drizzling down upon us. So we got that going on, and we'll get through it. We always do. It may make us change our diets and reassess what we're eating and drinking and all the stuff that goes along with it. But it is what it is. On the big picture front, of course, there's always... Oh, by the way, before I go there, I just want to say that the spirit of the people of Houston is pretty amazing. Before I go any further, I just want to go back. The spirit of the people of Houston is tremendous. Absolutely tremendous. And I just hope that that city can bounce back quicker than they anticipate or predict. That would be a real blessing. All right, so let's go to the big picture. The big picture is Donald Trump is meeting with the United Nations today. Instead of getting out of the United Nations, Trump's base is getting extremely, how should I say this, angry, increasingly angry. Restless would be putting it mildly. You know, there are the linchpin. Can we say that linchpin now? It's be one of those words. Oh, you can't use linchpin because lynch is inside that. I'm sorry. We're going to have to come up with another word. Another word. Speaking of Lynch, anybody catch Marshawn Lynch doing his dance on the sidelines at the Raider game on Sunday? Wow. Hey Marshawn, dance all you want. I got you on my fantasy team. The more dancing, the better for me. So, anyway, the linchpin kind of, foundational pieces for the Trump administration and the people that actually, punched the ballot box to vote Trump in. Immigration. Yes, immigration. They want Trump to stop immigration. And they want to wall because he said he would build a wall. Ann Coulter, who, she actually grew on me. I never used to like her because she always, the Republican Party for years was really desperately and shamelessly using the cover of being Republican when in actuality they were nothing more than craven globalists. And so when Ann Coulter would talk about somebody like George Bush or Mitt Romney or somebody on the right, it was usually in generally supportive tones and terms because that was the party and the ideology that she was connected to. She wanted less government. She wanted more nationalism. That's generally what Ann Coulter's MO has been. Although I haven't agreed with her for a lot in the past because I didn't think she had a grasp of the bigger picture. Not the liberal picture or the democratic picture, but the bigger picture. The history behind the history, the people behind the history behind the history. All those things go along with it. She kind of woke up a little bit. That was really kind of an interesting effect of what happened during the Trump election process. And I talked about this. I said, this is an important kind of moment in American history. This is an important moment in the history of humanity, to be quite honest with you, because people are waking up. Even the Ann Coulters and the Sean Hannitys of the world started to wake up out of their narcoleptic Republican slumber where they just, supported who was ever in the party. Right? They were doing the same thing that the left does, which is blind party allegiance. And then Trump came along and redefined all of it. Because with Trump, it wasn't just Trump and aligning with the Republican or the conservative platform, less government, less taxation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But with Trump, there was this kind of visceral jolt to everything. That was the Sun-Uranus conjunction in his chart. It was the lightning bolts from Zeus that came and just exploded onto the landscape. And of course, we had the big lightning bolt was WikiLeaks. And inside of WikiLeaks, there's all this damning information. It's chock full of conspiracy, the conspiracy of the left, the conspiracy of the DNC. And then on the other side of this, you've got James Keefe with the Veritas Project, and then blowing that wide open. Now we're seeing the machinations of what goes on behind the scenes. For the first time, really, in the history of the United States, we have this whole idea of conspiracy validated to us in real time. And if you don't think that that is explosive and transformational, then you are still asleep, and I'm sorry. To watch what happened with Bob Creamer after he was exposed by James Keefe and Veritas, to see what happened after the WikiLeaks files dropped, the cables dropped, and the bombshell that went off around that, and John Podesta. We've talked about this before, and what happened with Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the whole collusion of the DNC to snatch the nomination away from Bernie Sanders. And then there was the information that was connected to the Clinton Foundation and pay and play. I mean, here we were. This was conspiracy revealed real time, and it had an impact on people, and it had an impact on people like mainstream conservatives like Sean Hannity and Ann Coulter. They were like, they were fired up. Okay, here we go. Now, whether they were just repositioning themselves or reframing themselves so they could stay relevant inside of their own corporate media context, and I don't think that's really what Coulter does anyway. But that was it. And of course, we have basically the three pillars of the Trump administration, which was less immigration, less taxes, more jobs. That was it. Those are the three things that, from a platform level, he got elected on. From an ideological or psychological level, he got elected on the fact that he spoke their language and addressed their greatest needs and desires and tapped into the frustration and anger of a group that had not been represented, even by so-called Republican leadership. So we all know this. We've gone down this path, right? But now it looks as though Trump has clearly been co-opted, and the whole message of nationalism, and it will be changed, obviously, it will be tweaked, because they have to continue to tweak the message so that they can still theoretically fool or assuage some of the people that are hoping that the wall is built and taxes are cut and Obamacare is repealed. All those things, they want to keep them on tap for a while. So they'll do everything they can. Now, as Trump goes to the UN, he's like, well, we shouldn't pay for the UN. The UN is antiquated. Now here he's going to the UN, and what he's going to do is he's going to kind of do UN reform, with the United States leading the pack. We're going to get in, and we're going to lead from the front now. We're not going to lead from the back. And really, what he's going to do is he's going to politic against the rogue nations of North Korea, Syria, and Iran, because those are the three countries. I've said it again. I'll say it again. Said it before. Say it again. Those are the three countries that they need to flip. in order to bring them into the global banking system, which will be digitally distributed. Okay? If those countries aren't brought in, we are not participating in a new world order. A new world banking order, a new world governance order, it's all across the board. So they've got to flip those three countries. A fourth, if you throw in Cuba, I don't think that would be that hard, though. Let's put it that way. So this is where Trump is headed today, and he's going to address you and to begin to move in that direction. And also there's going to be the whole issue of sanctions on more. I guess they just want to cut North Korea off and give them nothing. You know, any country that does any kind of trade with North Korea will now be punished and sanctioned. I think that's where he's going to go with this. Sort of the same thing that they've done with Israel. That if you are boycotting Israel, then your business basically gets boycotted. But there's more going on. There's a lot more going on. That's just on the surface. They're also looking at, and this will not come through the UN, but they're looking at internet reform. And they're looking at truncating freedom of speech. This is all coming out now as part of the new program, Pogrom, to curtail what we talk about and how we talk about it and where we talk about it. There's a lot happening. There's another version of Twitter. It's called Gab. And Google wants to delist Gab from their search results because they feel that Gab is promoting hate speech. Gab is just promoting freedom of speech. It doesn't matter what side you're on. You can gab on Gab. That's the way it is, right? But this is now where we are. It's the front lines of who gets to say what and where. And it has been created in large part through the internet. You can still go outside, theoretically, unless you get shouted down by Antifa. So even that version of speech is being curtailed to some degree. Anyway, Trump, that's happening right now. That's the background. That's the background noise. Well, Trump goes to the UN and tries to reform the United States' position in relation with the UN. Basically, the country is being run at this point in time by Rex Tillerson, the three generals, and Gary Cohn. Mike Pence, to some degree. Now, what's going to happen to Trump and his base? This is a very interesting question. A very important question. This is a group of people that have been woken up. They are red-pilled. And even Sean Hannity and Ann Coulter, I think, got red-pilled during this whole process. So we have the midterm elections. They'll be coming up. And in 2018 here. And the whole idea of now this bloc being mobilized and not wanting, I mean, we're in very different times. Like, I don't believe that Trump's base is demoralized because he hasn't come through on his mandates. And even the left, once Hillary Clinton lost, they went through a period of abject depression. But ultimately, I'm not sure they were demoralized because they kind of skipped that. They skipped over demoralization and they got into anger. And so they've been angry and driving. It's like a hornet's nest. They've been driving this rhetoric and supporting, the momentum of Antifa, Black Lives Matter, and all the radical Uranus and Aries self-interest groups, right? So they've been doing that. And I think the right, or the deplorables, or the flyovers, they're going to be doing the same thing. They're just different. They're not. It's a different kind of mentality, and so they don't community organize Not like the left. The left has been working on this for years, because the left is really now an adjunct of the Communist Party. What do they call it? Communist Party, the USA, Comp USA, or whatever it's called. Anyway, that's why they're so good at organizing, because they've been doing it for a long time. They've been doing it for a very long time, so this is second nature to them. And they're cause committed, right? When you're cause committed and you have the deep pockets of Soros, who's the bag man for the Rothschilds, you can get things done. On the right, not as organized. But you will see people come out, and guess what will happen? Unless they fix the ballot boxes in the elections, which they might, because the midterms it's kind of a big deal. I mean, you could have people like Paul Ryan and Lindsey Graham. I mean, these people could lose their positions. And I'm not saying they will, but they could. I'll have to look at, I'll tell you what, I'll look at the astrology for the midterms. And we'll bring that up tomorrow. But those people could be replaced. And now all of a sudden you've got it's kind of like when Newt Gingrich, was running the show back in the day, and there were all these, newbie conservatives that Gingrich was going to basically marshal and use as his voter base or voting base inside of the Congress and the Senate. So we could be looking at something like that again, but it could be quite different than that time. And I'm sure some Democrats will sneak back in and make it a little more even. But the midterms are going to be very interesting, because I guess it would be somewhat like when the Tea Party kind of broke, which was a completely astroturf movement anyway. But that's when people were saying, okay, we're going to vote for something different. We're going to vote for these people because they stand for something different. Well, that was really a bunch of bullshit, because they really didn't stand for that much of anything that was different. These are the Tea Party candidates like Rubio, who kind of came in on the Tea Party wave. They were just nothing more than astroturf candidates who espoused certain talking points. When they got in, guess what? They were going to be just like everybody else. Scott Brown from Massachusetts, who eventually lost to Elizabeth Warren. Same deal, right? Didn't really do anything, because they were either running under the auspices of the Tea Party, and for them that would have been just a cover, or they were co-opted once they got inside. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens when the midterms roll around and people get to vote again. I was watching a special on HBO from the hotel room on Sunday morning, and it was all about the Constitution. HBO is getting very constitutional, very American. I was proud of HBO in that moment, sort of. A little hint of sarcasm there. So what was happening is that they had these celebrities, and all across the board, actors, news people, I think maybe an athlete or two, and they were reading the preamble. And so each one of them would have like a line or two to say, and they just, it's like those videos that they've been making, where the one person would say something, and then they'll cut to another person's face, and they'll say the next sentence, and the next sentence, and the next sentence, and then they bring them all together. United we stand against tyranny and hate, those videos. So they were doing, HBO had their version of the reading the preamble. Anderson Cooper, Robert De Niro, Robert Duvall, all these people are reading. The final person to read from the preamble, unless you've seen this special, you probably won't guess or get it. The final person was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And his section was the longest. And I thought to myself, this is really interesting, right? You've got all these people reading. If you're watching this, you get to the end, and who's running the anchor leg of the 400-meter relay? It's Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. And then I heard, like the day after that, that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson has actually filed to run for president in 2020. He has filed. Now, whether he runs or not is a whole other matter, but he has filed to run for president. And here he is on the final person in this domino kind of effect of reading the preamble. He's the last one. He has the most to say. So this is a very interesting development. And then, of course, I was listening to Alex Jones, and he was talking about, this is all after the fact, he's talking about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and it's like, hey people, we've got to be prepared. If Trump doesn't go our way, then we've got to be prepared, and we've got to look to somebody else. Oh, look at Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. He's a libertarian. He's a libertarian. And maybe we'll have to get behind him. Here's Alex positioning himself to ride the next gravy train, if that's what happens. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is a wrestler, basically. He was a wrestler, played football at the University of Miami. His father is Rocky Johnson, who's a professional wrestler whom I used to watch as a kid on TV. And his mother was the daughter of another wrestler, a Samoan wrestler by the name of Peter Maivia. So Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is part Samoan. It's part of his genealogy there, right? Wow. I was like, wow, this is interesting. Here we go. They're always telling us where they're going. They're always telling us kind of what's in the works. If you really can kind of sit back and watch and connect the dots, you'll see it. It's all there, hidden in plain sight, predictively programming you every step of the day, every step of the way, 24 hours a day. Now, what else can we look at around the life of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson? Where does he get his credentials to become a president? He's an actor. He was an athlete. He's very articulate, very funny. He's got a great eyebrow. Does that eyebrow thing. Well, mostly we know him from action films. Fast and Furious, and any other number of action films. Daddy Daycare, or whatever that is. He plays the babysitter, but he's like, this guy has to protect the kid anyway. So it's not Daddy Daycare. So he is in a HBO show called Ballers. And Ballers is how they are creating the credibility around Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. It's a show where he plays a sports agent. I believe he's an ex-athlete turned sports agent. And it shows him moving in these circles of power and proving himself on an intellectual level, on an emotional level, on a professional level, every step of the way. The show is about building the credibility of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson through a character. And I've seen a little bit of it. And I remember one scene that stood out. He was at a dinner party where clearly he had a seat at the table. This is an important scene to understand. The metaphor of having a seat at the table. This is where you want to be, right? You want to be at that table with those people in an intimate moment where they are partaking in libations and food. So the chakras are pretty much wide open in a moment like that, either from alcohol or from the commingling of energies. You want a seat at the table, because if you have a seat at the table and you can show yourself to be worthy of the seat at the table, you get invited in. That's what the seat at the table is about. You get invited in. So there he is. He's at this elite dinner with all these rich people, and they have this moment where they're talking about, I don't know, so somebody said, okay, well, what was your first experience around this or whatever it was. I forget what it was. But of course, he speaks last. And of course, his speech, his narrative is so poignant, so powerful, so in touch, so moving, so intense, so human, so revealing, so vulnerable, so powerful, right? And then they have the looks around the people that tip, oh my God, we're sitting amongst someone who has it. There's greatness sitting amongst us at that seat at the table. This is what Ballers is promoting around Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Watch the show. If you don't agree with me, watch the show. It's about somebody who starts off in one kind of career and then moves into the upper echelon of another career, power, portals of power, etc., etc., etc. This is what they're using to build up his credibility. Because other than being an actor and a wrestler and a college football player, he hasn't really done anything else. But it hasn't stopped America from electing people who have been actors, or people that have had their own reality TV show, or people that have absolutely zero past and zero credibility, have done nothing, but they've written a couple books, one of which they didn't, probably both of which they didn't really write. So why not? Why not? There's a good chance he'll also go up against Mark Zuckerberg. Yep, that's right, Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg, could you imagine that? Mark Zuckerberg and Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson for president? Could you imagine Mark Zuckerberg in a debate? Like, unless they are really reprogramming him, he will explode in a debate. They're going to try to get to the millennials somehow, some way through Zuckerberg. Trust me. Anyway, Trump's going to be at the UN today. It's going to be interesting to watch that soap opera. Well, at least Nikki Haley doesn't get to speak today at the UN, or maybe she will. But I'm not sure if there's anybody that's more reviled and held in contempt than Nikki Haley across both parties, or at least certainly on the Dem side, and even people inside of the Republican Party or on the conservative side. They don't like her. They don't dig her. The former Waffle House waitress. It's true. Hey, that's the American way, though. It's the American story, right? You can be a Waffle House waitress and then tell the rest of the world at some point that we're going to bomb the shit out of Korea. If Kim doesn't like it, he can deal with Mad Dog Mattis. Anyway, that's where we are. We're approaching September 23rd. Don't be freaked out about it. Don't be freaked out about it. Que sera, sera. Whatever will be, will be. Just be right with yourself. Be right with who you are. Be right with your soul. Be right with your actions. Be right with your loved ones to the best of your ability. It's not always easy. Trust me, I understand it. But it is incumbent upon us, at the very least, to have a clean voting record, as it were, inside of ourselves. And of course, we always, 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 always have the assistance of grace through the love of God, which is true. It's absolutely true. You're going to get it here, and maybe very populist, very distilled down language. Oh my God, here goes Robert again. That's true, though. The only reason I know it's true is because I've been the recipient of it in my lifetime. I was the recipient of it on Sunday night, or early Monday morning, when I was moved out of the arms of what could have been pretty significant danger. And I still have my truck. All right, so that's it. That's it for today's show. Went 50 minutes today. Wow. You know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real. Your heart to open what's possible. It's great to be back. I'm Robert-Hoenix. Have a fantastic